Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the sewing video on how I made this dress. Now if you are seeing this tutorial for the very first time, I have a different video on where I made the pattern drafting and cutting process. If you have not watched that, I'm going to leave a link for it on the description tab. Please do well to start from there. Now for the rest of us, let's get started. So this is the bustier part, and I've also gone ahead to cut padded for it. So I'm going to go ahead and sew it up together. Now as you all can see, I've sewn it up, and I also went ahead to trim out any sewing allowance on the joining region, and for the lining as well, I've sewed that. Now this is our material for the Milkmaid effect, and if you are using a crepe fabric, it's advisable to use at least a chantilly lace for this part. So now after cutting out this part, the next thing I'm going to do is to make a loose stitch on the upper part and the down part of this fabric. The loose stitch will help us to make our gathers. So here I've gone ahead to sew a loose stitch on both the upper part and the down part. So my loose stitch ran all the way from one armhole to the other armhole for the up, and on the down is just straight up. So after making the loose stitch, I went ahead to gather it together. So I'm done gathering it, and this is what we have. So on one part of the fabric, my thread was cut out, but that is totally fine. I can still use my hand to adjust it. Now I'm going to place the armhole of this gathered fabric with the armhole of my bustier, as you all can see, and then I'll pin it up together. So this pinning is going to help me to arrange the gathers properly. And now that I'm done arranging, I'll go ahead and sew both on the up part and the down part of the gathers. So here I've sewn them together, and this is what we have. As you all can see, it's forming in shape. So I'm just going to use an iron to press it down just to arrange it more properly. Now I'm done ironing it, and this is what we have. So I've kept that aside. Now for the neckline, I'm going to be using the doll face for both the main fabric and for the turning, that's the lining. So on the slanted side, I'll go ahead and sew it up with half an inch allowance and turn it over. So this is it, I've sewn it and turned it. Now I'm going to keep that aside. Now I've brought back the bustier that we sewed with the Milkmaid. So now what we're going to do is to attach this neckline to it. So we're going to locate the dart point and just pin it directly on where the dart point is. As you all can see, we'll locate the dart point and then we'll pin the sleeve exactly where the dart point is. And after pinning it up, we're going to bring our lining and placing it right sides facing the bustier, we'll go ahead and sew it up just on the chest region. So for the sewing, on the chest part, I'm going to use half an inch sewing allowance to sew it up. And for the armhole side, I use 0.1 inch allowance or 0.2 because we're still going to attach a sleeve to it. So now as you all can see, I've gone ahead to sew it, and on the lining side, I pushed my sewing allowance to it and sewed it down. And after that, I'll go ahead and place it aside. Now for the skirt, it's time for us to attach that design, that straight design that you saw on the picture. But to do that, we have to attach the skirt to the waist first because the design started from the underbust region. So here I went ahead to notch the midpoint of my skirt and the midpoint of this waist part, and then placing both notches together, I went ahead to sew it up. So to attach this design on the skirt, we need to draw a line that will guide us on where to place the design. So I folded my skirt into two just to find the midpoint on the waist. On the hip point as well, I folded it on the right side, and then I would mark out the midpoints. After that, I'll go ahead and join both midpoints together to form a straight line. And after that, on the end of the skirt, I folded it as well and I marked the midpoint of it. After marking it, I'll connect it to the straight line that I formed. Now that I'm done drawing my midline, I'm going to go ahead and come out from it on both sides by half of my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 3.5 inches. So on the hip line, I came out by half of my nipple to nipple measurement plus 1 inch extra because the line on the hip part became a bit curvy. So after that, I went ahead to connect what I marked on the hip line to what I marked on the waistline, like this. Now after that, on the knee line, I came in again by half of my nipple to nipple measurement on both sides. And then I'll connect it to what I marked on the hip line. And then on the end of the dress, I came in again by half of my nipple to nipple measurement and I just connected it straight up. So for the other curved design on the side, I just went ahead to locate my midpoint, and from the midpoint, I just curved it up to like 5 inches above. So the same thing I did it for the other side of the skirt. So while doing that, I decided to come down from the hip line by 1 inch. So from this 1 inch, I connected it back to the top of the line. And this time I decided to make the line a bit more curvier than I did before. Now this is the fabric I cut out for the designs. For the length of it, it is long enough to run from the waist to the end of the skirt. And for the width, I cut out 2.5 inches, which is 1.5 inch for the design and 1 inch for sewing allowance. As you all can see, I've already ironed in the allowances. So for the design on the side, this is what I cut, and as you all can see, it is a bit curvy. So I achieved this curvy shape by cutting the fabric on a bias. As for the width, it is also 1.5 inch with 1 inch sewing allowance. And for the length, you will just use the line that you drew to determine the length that you need. So placing this fabric on the line, you will go ahead and sew on both edges of the fabric. So I'm done sewing it down and this is what we have. So I just went ahead to cut off all the excesses. And for the long design, placing it on the outer part of the line, we're going to go ahead and sew it down. So while sewing it down, it's also going to cover the raw edges of the curved design that we sewed, like this. So we're going to do the same thing for the other line. Now as you all can see, I've gone ahead to sew the long design down and this is what we have. Now the next thing we're going to do is to attach the skirt part to our bustier part. So locating the midpoint of the skirt and the midpoint of the bustier, we're going to notch it and then placing both midpoints we'll sew it down. So for the lining as well, we'll notch the midpoint as well. Notch the midpoint of the skirt part of the lining and we'll go ahead and sew it down. Now I've gone ahead to join it down, and for the lining I've gone ahead to sew it down as well. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to turn it over to the wrong side, and after turning it over to the wrong side, I will start by sewing the down part of the dress together. So I'm going to sew the down with 1/2 inch sewing allowance, and then for the sides of the dress I'm going to sew them down with 0.1 inch at least, and I'm going to leave a little space for turning it over. So here I've turned it over and this is the space I left for turning. So what I'm going to do is to just close it up, and after closing it up, I'm going to keep this aside. Now for the back, the first thing we're going to do is to draft our darts. So I first of all marked my zipper allowance, and from there I came in by half of my nipple to nipple measurement and I marked that down. Next thing I went ahead to do is to mark my chest line. I came in again by half of my nipple to nipple measurement plus zipper allowance, and then on one side of the line I came in by 1/2 inch and connected it to the top of the line I made. So we're going to sew on that slanted line to sew our darts, and the same thing we're going to do for the lining and the second part of the back. Now as you all can see, I've gone ahead to sew my dart. Now the next thing we're going to do is to attach the top of the bag to the down part of the bag by sewing it down. Now I've gone ahead to sew it down. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to turn my back piece over with a lining. So we'll start by sewing on the neckline, and after sewing on the neckline, just like we did for the back, we'll start again by sewing on the down parts with half an inch allowance, and then we'll sew on both sides of the back using at least 0.1 inch allowance, and we'll do the same thing for the other side. So here I've gone ahead to sew it down, as you all can see, and I've turned it over to the front. So I turned it over from my armhole region. I left a space on the armhole region. So after turning it over, this is what we have. The next thing we're going to do is locating where we want our zip to stop. We'll go ahead and mark it down. And then from where our zip will stop, we'll sew down to where our slit begins. Now after sewing it down, we'll go ahead and attach our zip on the remaining line. Now I've attached my zip and I've sewed down on the remaining parts. And the next thing we're going to do is to attach the shoulder of the front to the shoulder of the back. Now to do this, if you want a clean finishing, you just have to use the armhole, that's the shoulder of the back, to wrap the shoulder of the front and sew it down. So remember that we left a space in the armhole of the front, which is why we are able to use the back to wrap the front. So here we'll just use the fabric of the back and the lining to wrap that of the front, and then we'll sew it down. Now I'm done sewing it down, and this is what I have. As for the finishing, you can see that it is very neat. So I'm going to keep this aside and bring in my sleeve. So as for the sleeve, I've gone ahead to fold the down part using the allowance that I left. Now from the down part, I came up by 5 inches. This is going to be the amount of inches for the flay at the down part of the sleeve. And then on that 5 inches, I went ahead to sew this fabric that I have cut out. This is going to serve as a casing for my elastic. Now for the length of the elastic, I just use exactly the round measurement of where this elastic point is going to rest on my arm. Now, after I'm done, I started feeding in the elastic on the casing. And after feeding it, I would go ahead and pin the elastic on both sides of the casing just to keep it in place. So that is it for my sleeve, and this same thing I did here, I'll do it for the second sleeve. Now after that, I went ahead to locate the midpoint of the top of the sleeve. I notched it down, and then placing the notch region on the midpoint of the shoulder, I'll go ahead and sew it down in the armhole part. So after sewing down the sleeve, the next thing we're going to do is just to turn the dress over to the wrong side and sew it down. Now after joining my dress, this is what I got. So as you all can see, the dress came out beautifully. So if you enjoyed my video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any question, you can leave it in the comment section. And please subscribe to my channel to get more of my videos and tutorials. If you know anyone that this video would be helpful to, please share it out to them. And I'm going to see you all in my next one. Thank you and bye.